You told yourself this would be the last time. Last time you would struggle with this. Last time you would fall into that habit. Last time you would feel far from God and not know how to come back. But here you are again. Same place. Same silence. Same disappointments eating on your chest like a weight you can't explain to anyone. And the worst part? You didn't even fall dramatically. It wasn't some huge explosion. It was small. Quiet. Almost normal. That's what makes it dangerous. Because now your mind starts talking. Maybe I'm not serious enough. Maybe I don't have what it takes. Maybe I keep disappointing God too much. And suddenly, failure doesn't feel like an event anymore. It feels like an identity. You don't just think, I failed. You start thinking, I am a failure. And right there, something subtle happens. You stop praying with confidence. You stop opening your Bible with hunger. You start avoiding God, not because you hate Him, but because you're ashamed of how many times you've come back empty-handed. But here's what you're not seeing yet. This moment you're in. It's not proof that you're far gone. It's proof that you're still aware. Still sensitive. Still not numb. And that matters more than you think. Because people who are truly don't feel this anymore. Now the question is not whether you failed. The question is what you do next when failure is staring at you again.
Nobody sees this part. Not your friends, not your church, not the people who think you're doing fine. They only see your surface, the smile, the updates, the I'm good. But inside, there's a war. You are trying to love God while also feeling like you keep disappointing Him. So you start negotiating in your mind. I'll pray more tomorrow. I'll fix it next week. I just need to get myself together first. But deep down, you know that's not real discipline. That's avoidance dressed as planning. Because sitting with God in this state feels uncomfortable. You think He's tired of you. You think heaven is watching you with frustration. So instead of running to Him, you delay Him. And that delay slowly becomes distance. Not because God moved, but because shame convinced you to hide. And here's the truth you need to hear clearly. Shame always makes you interpret God through your failure instead of His nature. So you stop seeing Him as Father and start seeing Him as disappointed authority. That shift is what keeps you stuck longer than the failure itself. Because now even your repentance feels heavy. Even your prayers feel rehearsed. Even your worship feels like you're trying to make up for it. But that's not relationship anymore. That's debt mentality. And it's breaking you quietly. There's a lie that keeps restarting your cycle. It sounds spiritual, even responsible. I should be better by now. That sentence looks harmless. But it's actually pride disguised as accountability. Because it assumes growth should be linear, clean, predictable, controlled. But real transformation doesn't work like that. And the deeper issue is this. You've started believing that your consistency earns God's attention. So when you fail, you don't just feel weak. You feel disqualified. But that is not how grace operates. Grace is not impressed by your streak of good days. And it is not canceled by your worst day. The real trap is thinking your performance is what keeps you in God's presence. So you swing between extremes. On good days, you feel close to Him. On bad days, you withdraw completely. That is not spiritual maturity. That is emotional dependence on your own behavior. And it will exhaust you. Because no human being can maintain perfection as a strategy for relationship with God. At some point, something will break. And when it breaks, the question is whether you run toward Him or away from Him. There's a lie that keeps restarting your cycle. It sounds spiritual, even responsible. I should be better by now. That sentence looks harmless. But it's actually pride disguised as accountability. Because it assumes growth should be linear, clean, predictable, controlled. But real transformation doesn't work like that. And the deeper issue is this. You've started believing that your consistency earns God's attention. So when you fail, you don't just feel weak. You feel disqualified. But that is not how grace operates. Grace is not impressed by your streak of good days. And it is not canceled by your worst day. The real trap is thinking your performance is what keeps you in God's presence. So you swing between extremes. On good days, you feel close to Him. On bad days, you withdraw completely. That is not spiritual maturity. That is emotional dependence on your own behavior. And it will exhaust you. Because no human being can maintain perfection as a strategy for relationship with God. At some point, something will break. And when it breaks, the question is whether you run toward Him or away from Him. There is a moment you keep skipping. It happens right after failure, right after the fall, right after the silence. That moment is not punishment. It's invitation. But most people don't see it that way. They see failure guilt hiding. But the real sequence is failure awareness decision point. And that decision point is where everything changes. Because in that moment, you either build your identity around the failure, or you anchor yourself in something deeper than it. Not denial, not pretending it didn't happen, but refusing to make it final. You have to understand this clearly. God is not waiting for you to clean yourself up before you come. The cleaning happens in His presence, not outside it. But shame will always try to reverse that order. Tells you, fix yourself first, then come back. Which sounds responsible, but it's actually separation disguised as discipline. And every time you believe it, you delay healing. The turning point is simple but not easy. Stop negotiating access to God based on your condition. Start coming as you are, not as you wish you were. Now the work is different. Not performance, not promises, not emotional resets. Rebuilding identity. Because if you don't fix how you see yourself, you will keep repeating the same cycle even after good intentions. You need a new internal baseline. I don't run from God when I fail. I return faster. That alone disrupts the loop. Because the enemy doesn't need you to reject God completely. He just needs you to delay your return. Delay creates distance. Distance creates coldness. Coldness creates avoidance. And then the cycle resets. So your new strength is speed of return, not perfection of behavior. You will still fall sometimes. That is not the issue. The issue is whether failure becomes a stopping point or a turning point. Stop building your identity on how often you get it right. Start building it on how quickly you come back. That is maturity, not absence of struggle, but refusal to stay down. There is a version of you that thinks this is who you are now. The one who keeps failing. The one who keeps restarting. The one who feels stuck in cycles. But that is not the final version. That is just the current chapter. And chapters are not identities. They are transitions. What changes everything is this. You stop interpreting your life through your last failure, and you start interpreting it through your direction of return. Because even now, you are still here, still listening, still aware, still not fully gone. That matters more than you think. Not because awareness saves you, but because awareness is where rebuilding starts. So the question is no longer, why did I fail again? The real question is, will I stay away, or will I return immediately this time? Because the difference between stagnation and transformation is not perfection, it's return speed. And your next move will decide everything. There is a dangerous conclusion people reach quietly, not loudly, not consciously. It just settles over time. It's probably not going to change. That thought is heavier than failure itself, because failure is an event, but hopelessness is a system. Once you accept that conclusion, your behavior changes in subtle ways. You stop fighting with urgency. You stop praying with expectation. You stop correcting yourself quickly, not because you don't care anymore, but because you've stopped believing movement is possible. And this is where people get stuck for years without realizing it. You still look active spiritually. You still attend, still hear, still try. But internally, something has gone offline. Expectation. You are no longer expecting transformation, just repetition. And once expectation dies, discipline becomes mechanical, not alive. You begin to live like someone maintaining religion, not someone being transformed. But here's the flaw in that conclusion. It assumes your current state is stable. It is not. Spiritual and internal states are not static. They either move upward or downward depending on what you reinforce. So when you say, it's not changing, what you're really saying is, I have stopped engaging the process that produces change. Because change is not passive. It is not automatic. It responds to engagement, confrontation, and return. This is why people misunderstand grace. They think grace removes responsibility. It doesn't. It removes condemnation so you can actually face responsibility without collapse. But if you remove responsibility entirely, what remains is stagnation dressed as peace. So the question is not whether you've failed too much. The question is whether you've quietly stopped participating in your own restoration. Because the moment you disengage, nothing external can compensate for that. Not time, not guilt, not intention. Only re-engagement breaks that pattern. And it starts with one thing. Refusing to accept, this is just how it is now. That sentence is not truth. It is resignation. A lot of people miss the real way back. They think return must feel powerful, emotional, clean, convincing, like a moment where everything clicks, and they suddenly feel different. But most real returns are not dramatic. They are simple decisions made in weak moments. I'm coming back now. Not after you feel better. Not after you've fixed everything. Not after you've regained confidence. Now. The problem is pride hates simplicity. It wants you to earn your way back with intensity. So you wait until you feel ready. But readiness is often just delay in disguise. Because if you wait for perfect emotion, you will stay stuck in cycles of waiting. And cycles of waiting slowly become identity. You start believing, I'm someone who is always starting over. But that is not identity. That is inertia. Here's the hard truth. God is not impressed by how emotional your return is. He responds to honesty, not performance. A weak, honest return is stronger than a dramatic but delayed one, because delay feeds distance, and distance is what strengthens shame. So what actually breaks the cycle? Consistency of return, not intensity of effort. You don't need a new version of yourself to come back. You need to stop negotiating with your brokenness before returning. The real shift is this: stop making your state the condition for your return, because if your condition becomes the gatekeeper, you will always find reasons to delay, and delay is where cycles survive. So the final confrontation is simple but uncomfortable. Will you keep waiting to feel worthy enough to come back? Or will you come back because you refuse to stay away any longer? That decision is where everything changes. Not because you suddenly become strong, but because you stop agreeing with distance.